And now we're going to catch up with Mark Carnegie on Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. I think you'll find this very, very insightful. For people who don't know Mark Carnegie, just position yourself, in the investment community of Australia.
So, as you say, lifetime skeptic, always been a sort of, broken market investor in Indonesia when nobody believed Indonesia was a thing, in media in the early 90s in Australia, where all of those companies had gone bankrupt. So I'd call myself a sort of contrarian. This is the first time I've climbed on a bandwagon, as you say, Peter. So, my experience was I worked for 10 years as a partner of Hellman and Friedman, big West Coast buyout firm. Then in 2000 with John Wiley, started Carnegie Wiley, a traditional private equity and advisory business. We sold that to Lazard and it became Lazard Australia. And then since then, I was really mainstream but value-oriented investor for my life. So as you say, the whole of the crypto run has been a confusing thing to have me involved in it.
Yeah. What initially grabbed you about Bitcoin such that you became a believer at such an early stage?
So the first thing I need to explain, and it's probably going to be confusing, is I'm a big crypto believer. And it really wasn't until a year ago that I was willing to countenance Bitcoin as a legitimate part of the whole ecosystem. So a couple of things happened to Bitcoin post FTX that mean that I feel like it's a legitimate part of this. But I've always been an Ethereum maxi, and probably that's too much details for your listeners. But just to make a point, which is I think there are a whole lot of really powerful use cases for crypto. Bitcoin is in a completely different category, what it's trying to achieve, which I'm happy to go into, but I'm far more skeptical about Bitcoin than I am about the rest of them.
Okay. So let's just start with Bitcoin, because as you know, it's the one cryptocurrency that everyone knows, and they are staggered at what's happening to the price of it. Why do you think it's seen as such a popular currency, inverted commas, but also such that someone like the president of the USA, Donald Trump, is very keen to make it a legitimate part of the currency scene? Why has it captured the imagination in that sense?
So, I mean, it was first, so that was number one. And number two, it came along at a time where it captured a whole series of people really, really despairing about US monetary policy. So it's found a place in the American financial ecosystem, which is really, really hard to understand in the context of anywhere else, because a huge chunk of what's driving it is a political phenomenon rather than an economic phenomenon.
Yeah. How important is it for Bitcoin to have a fraternity, for example, and let's run through the fraternities that love Bitcoin. Clearly, the internet nerd fraternity, the illegal scene, the criminal.
That's gone now. I mean, that's certainly that whole hidden road stuff. That's all washed out now. I mean, I can tell you. But that might have been an important part of what launched it, Peter, but not now.
Yeah. Is that because there's monitoring of the actual actions? Like what?
Yeah, the FBI can trace the wallets, and so it just doesn't get used for that.
Okay.
Like it used to.
Okay. So why have you become more skeptical about or let me use the word skeptical. Why are you more interested in other cryptocurrencies like Ethereum rather than Bitcoin?
Because it had a much more powerful use case. So do you mind if I just try and explain crypto for people who don't understand?
No doubt. I'd love you to do that.
Okay. So start with what was the problem they were trying to solve. Yeah. So go back to, there's a thing called the Byzantine generals problem, which was a computer problem that was posed in the mid-1980s. So really, really early, before the internet, before anything. And here was the question they were asking. They were saying, look, there are all these hostile actors out there in computer land, and there's all sorts of different computers that can talk to each other. How would that system ever be trustworthy? How would a system of computers being linked together ever be trustworthy? Because you would always be subject to people turning on you, becoming malicious actors, and you wouldn't know who they were. So it's a really, really complicated mathematical and computer problem. And people spent a whole lot of time from about 1988 trying to figure it out. But by 2005, 2006, so in computer terms, endless amount of time, nobody had ever actually solved the Byzantine general problem. They had not worked out how you could create trust in a trustless world. Then, just in the shadow of the GFC, a guy called Hal Finney, who was the one saying, I'll pay a bounty for anybody who can figure out how you can transfer these units, know what they're worth, got from Satoshi in his inbox the Bitcoin Whitepaper, what is called proof of work. And it solved this problem that had been out there for a huge amount of time. And that was what created the impact. We'd seen the world financial system break apart. We've seen central banks go in and bail out the rich at the expense of the poor. A whole lot of American technology people were absolutely furious about it, just because they'd lost their jobs, their parents had lost their house. They did not believe in the American financial system. And then this white paper arrived that said, you don't have to trust government. You can create your own currency. You can create your own digital gold. Now, you can imagine for a set of American libertarians who've just seen the government intervene to bail out Wall Street, what a firestorm of ideology this started. Now, it bounced around for a long time before the mainstream got hold of it. The cypherpunks, which were the people behind this, were an extraordinarily clever group of people, but they weren't mainstream. So that's what got the whole thing started. And it's a really important thing that you can have trust in a trustless world, that there's only going to be 21 million of these things. It's a big deal. Now, it bounced around for a long time when the Democrats issued their jihad on it, wanted to kill it, saw that they couldn't control it. But when Trump was a low odds that he was going to win against Biden in the early days, a big chunk of the MAGA guys grabbed hold of this as, look at the Democrats, look at how much they're spending. Here's the only thing that's safe, and started pushing this is digital gold, this is the new gold narrative. And that is ultimately what it's turned from, which was a solution to a computer problem, to now it's a religion. It's a religion of a particular type of digital gold.
Yeah. And you know yourself, the people who are gold bugs are religious about gold. And and if gold doesn't go in the right direction, they'll blame anybody out there who might be a dissenter. And you're saying the same is basically.
Without a doubt. Think about a set of very, very smart computer people who say gold's from my great grandparents, but I'm the same cultural core that Bitcoin's my gold. And that's what sustains it. And even if the Democrats get back now, it's going to be a story of the election was stolen, the Democrats have ruined the economy, etc. I'm going to hold on to my Bitcoin because the government can't take it off.
Okay. So given the fact that you're not, in a sense, and I don't want to use the word spruiker, but you're not a Bitcoin supporter or You're not.
No, I mean, you've got to recognize that there's enough very rich, very clever people who control the American economy who are behind Bitcoin. You don't want to stand, you remember from our day that never fight the Fed. Well, trust
Yeah.
me, you don't want to be fighting these guys when they're getting hold of Bitcoin.
Yeah. Are you still invested in Bitcoin despite?
I've still got a fund, mate, that has 50% Bitcoin, depending on the day.
Yeah.
It's overweight Ethereum structurally.
Okay. Tell us why Ethereum is the one that you think has, I guess, a wider application and greater potential acceptance. Is that a fair call?
I just like it. I recognize that the Bitcoin guys are the winning hand, but it's a bit like in the glory days supporting Manchester City against Manchester United, right? I just happen to like City better than United. Now, I'm hoping that some rich Arab buys City and does what they've done with it recently with Ethereum. But ultimately, if you say all that Bitcoin can do, as somebody described it, it's like a rock. It's like gold. You can't really, I don't want to go into the details of the Ordinals protocol, but at 120,000, there's no way you can actually use the Bitcoin blockchain for anything serious. Just it'll clog up the system and stuff like that. It's possible, but Ethereum, by contrast, was meant to solve two problems. So the first, if you think about the Byzantine generals, it was just proving on a blockchain that my Bitcoin are my Bitcoin. Yeah, that's what it proves. So that you can go to somebody and say, I've got 100 Bitcoin, and they can look at your wallet and your address and stuff like that and say, yes, he did. Yeah. What Vitalik did when he came along was say, well, that doesn't sound like much fun, but it's a pretty useful tool. What I'm going to do is say, I can staple any sort of a contract to a Bitcoin, to a block on the blockchain that says, here is proof that this works. Yeah, this proof. So Mark and Peter were sitting in a pub. I can now staple something that says this picture of us in the pub it did happen on X day at Y time. So it's proof of all sorts of different things that say, here was the contract, here are the terms of the contract entered into at a particular time. That exists on the blockchain. So there's no capacity to doubt what are the facts around that Bitcoin. So sorry, that Ethereum block, your contract that you've stapled to the Ethereum block. So that made it just day-to-day valuable for all sorts of different things. Yeah. Proving you own stuff, proving that stuff was actually produced by X, all sorts of different things. So that for me created a functional, productive use. And that was really the thing that swung it for me. Now we can argue about cost of gas on it. Is the Ethereum ecosystem properly distributed? All sorts of different things. But I just have always liked Ethereum more.
Yeah. Can people have confidence if they decide to play the Ethereum game, buy at a certain price, have confidence that the future price will be
I
determined?
don't think you can have what I've said to people about crypto is low single-digit percentage of your overall and some amount of dollar cost averaging, right? I have no confidence that this all ain't going to zero, mate. So don't hear me on that. But anybody who's been doing, 0.25% every quarter or 0.5% every 6 months on some sort of dollar cost averaging basis, right? You're 1,000 basis points to the good if you've been doing it any reasonable time. And yes, people can argue about, is it correlated? Isn't it correlated, etc. I don't like that debate as a support for Bitcoin one about reducing volatility and correlation. The raw facts are, this is just too big an industry to ignore now. Now, that wasn't why I got into it. I got into it for a whole lot of the use cases about reducing the frictional cost of the SWIFT network. So what they call, when they're talking about stable coins, really, I got into it for that and a whole series of sort of emerging market workforce reasons. But all of them, I think, are way too complicated for here.
Okay, Mark, I'm not going to ask you a question such that people think, oh, I'm taking Mark Carnegie's advice because you both know we don't want that message to be put out there. But if you were asked by one of your wonderful children, um, Dad, when Bitcoin falls or when Ethereum falls, is it does it make sense to be a buyer on the low on the basis that you're saying this is not going to go away and it does have sort of qualities a bit like gold in the sense that it can be down, but those true believers will ultimately jump on board at some stage and the price will spike.
My view is you've got a dollar cost average. The volatility is just too hard. So anybody wants to day trade Bitcoin, go your hardest, but I'm not advising anybody to do that. What I was saying was having crypto as low, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% of your portfolio and dollar cost average over a long period of time seems like a rational thing to do. Yeah. Now, when we're managing money, we manage, a fund for people. That fund is diversified across the crypto universe. That's cost us returns compared to going all Bitcoin, but we still feel far more comfortable with a diversified portfolio. It's a very high alpha game, Peter. There's just knowing what you're doing here. You can go and buy some of the Bitcoin ETFs and say, yeah, I own a bit. I think that's completely safe. Do that in 3, 4, 10 chunks. Don't do it on one. Don't think you know how to trade it better than other people. That's a perfect good strategy. If you don't like that and you want diversification, you can come and talk to the guys who run my fund.
Yeah. I remember when Bill Miller was asked about this about 4 or 5 years ago, he said, look, just like he said, it can go up and can go down, but he said, I can see good sense of having 1% or 2% of your portfolio in this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now, your fund, is it accessible to normal people?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just on the website. You go and talk to people for sure.
And what's the fund called, Mark?
No, it's MHC Digital Asset Fund. Yeah.
Okay. Well, mate, thanks for joining us.
Sorry for the rant, mate, but this thing ain't going away.
Now, look, I only wanted to interview you so you would do a rant, and you delivered. Thanks very much. And that was Mark Carnegie, who joined us from London. His organisation is MHC Digital Group.